Third fallacy. I can't get my idea into a single sentence. Before you address that fallacy,
Okay.
this goes back to the concept of specificity and concept.
Absolutely.
So
That's
knowing what the concept of what you're trying to write is, and then being as specific as possible. So you're probably going to want to talk about a log line.
Well, this is what I'm going to say first, is that if you honestly think that you can't express your idea in one sentence, it means in nearly every case, no matter how resistant people are to this idea, this is true in nearly every case.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't express your idea in one sentence, even if it's a long sentence, it is a signal that you are conceptually unclear. If you can't say it in one sentence, then you don't understand your story conceptually well enough yet.
I'm going to play the quiz game with you. I'm going to start saying movie titles, and you're going to have to give me those concept lines.
Oh my God, I'm a little too tired to do that.
You're a little bit rusty. That's always fun, though. Okay, I'll just put it in.
All right.
I'll put it in your head.
If you throw one at me later, I'll do my best.
Okay, we'll do that later. But
look, I could do one right now. I could say, I'll pick a hard one.
No, pick an easy one.
No. Like, just because we were just talking about it a little while ago, and I've thought about it. Being John Malkovich.
Okay.
A puppeteer is unhappy with his life and discovers a secret portal into the mind of John Malkovich. That's Being John Malkovich. Now, it's a lot more than that, and everything grows from that. But that's what that story is.
So that would be the concise one-sentence explanation, the concept.
The one that I just came up with right now in 10 seconds.
Right. I'm not gonna judge it as far as is it brilliant or not. But that would be an example.
Sure. That's an example of something closer to a log line. What I learned at Writers Boot Camp, and it's something that I talk about a lot, is something called a premise line.
Yeah.
And a premise line is similar. It's like cousins with a log line, but whereas the log line is sort of a selling tool, a premise line is more of a development tool. It's a way that you take those 5 story components that I mentioned earlier, and you combine them into one sentence that describes your story while incorporating all 5 of your story components in the most compelling way that you can.
I'm not going to assume that everybody that's is listening now or watching now or is going to be watching and listening to this in the future is either going to be an established writer or somebody that's just getting started. So
actually, I invited some pretty intense folks here, so it's a little freaky because if they're watching, they know all my tricks.
Okay.
So they could call me on it later. So if you're out there, if you're watching, go easy on me.
No. We want the hard questions. Okay. So like I said, I'm not gonna. I don't know who's watching, and so I'm going to sort of play devil's advocate a little bit in order to make sure that we understand at least the verbiage that we're using. We're not taking anything for granted. Okay. So could you establish a context why it is that having a premise line, a log line, or a one-sentence explanation of what your movie is about, why is that important? If you could just provide a context for that.
Well,
is it something is it something that a producer wants to hear? Is that the way you pitch your script? Is it something just for development purposes? Is it an exercise?
It's sort of both.
Okay.
But it starts if we're talking about process and we're talking about developing the concept of your story, then it's first and foremost a development tool. Because if you can get to the point where you can have one really exciting, really interesting sentence that encapsulates your entire story, then you know your story really well. It's sort of what I was just talking about with the thing in the Robert Pirsig book, right?
Yeah.
Those 5 story components are like the doorknob on each of the doors, right? They're the specific things. And now in this sentence, and if you know them really well and how they work together, and you know them so well that you can put them into one sentence together, then you're actually freeing yourself up to be far more creative with your choices because you know those components and how they work together so much better, you know.
Okay, Celine is asking if you could elaborate on the concept of story premise. I don't know, did we just address that, do you think?
Yeah, she seemed pretty happy with
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Maria. All right,
All
so
right.
so now that we've covered that, then what is this fallacy of people saying I can't get my idea into a single sentence?
It's just resistance to being conceptually clear.
What is that resistance all about?
The resistance is, well, I think it's personal, right? I think everybody is resistant to it for a different reason. But if I'm being really honest,
Yeah.
the reason I think most people are resistant to it is because they have a misguided notions of what it means to write a script of any sort.
Okay, what would that be? I mean, what could be a misguided notion?
That they don't think that it's important to be able to state their idea succinctly. That just seems like a dog and pony show to them, when in reality, it's one of the most important things. And not for pitching, not for marketing purposes, although it will help with that, absolutely. But for all the reasons we've already talked about, it's important. And people, I don't think, get that. And again, I think it's because of this, again, sort of this notion that I'm writing a script and the script is the thing that's important and the script speaks for itself. And that's just all kind of misinformed. It's about conceptual clarity first.
Can you attribute that misinformation? I mean, I'm not looking to cast aspersions, but can you attribute that misinformation? I mean, is it like, for example, I'm a procrastinator. I like being under the gun, so I procrastinate until I'm under the gun, and then I get it done. And I've always been a procrastinator.
Sure.
Is that it? I mean, or is it something else, or is it just the way that?
No, I think it's that writing is one of those things that a lot of people look at and they think they have this idea that it's easy. And so they just say, hey, I'm going to write a script. And they sit down and they start writing. And there's something very satisfying about doing that, about putting pen to paper or, fingers to typewriter in this day and age, and starting to write your story. But what happens is that more often than not, people do that. They start way before they ever should be writing a single script page. That they haven't done any of the work to develop the concept yet. And that's why a lot of people start with these great, for example, one of the reasons why people start with these great inspirations and then they have all these scripts that they never finish. The reason they don't finish is because they had this great idea, but they didn't develop it before they got stuck into the page, before they got stuck into writing the script page. And I think all of those things are related. I know we sort of just went off on a tangent a little bit.
But that's interesting because it's happened to me. You get so enamored of your original idea that you can't let it go because even though it's not working for you anymore, you're just holding on to it, hoping that.
Yes, people in general, I shouldn't say people in general, but a lot of writers get way too attached to the first thing that they write. And you have to do your best to break yourself of that habit. In most cases, the first thing you write is not going to be the best idea. And it reminds me of something that you alluded to a little earlier that I wanted to touch on, this idea of first drafts.
Yeah.
And this misguided notion that you're going to get the whole first draft, like you're going to write a first draft and it's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
That's nonsense.
What are you talking about?
That anyone
dare you.
who thinks that doesn't know what a first draft is for.
You've obviously never read my first draft, sir. Kevin,
Actually, I have.
could you just go ahead and fill up your glass with Diet Coke? I got a note here from Maria. We're welcoming some people that are just logging on, and Kevin and I are talking about. We're going through a list of 12 fallacies that typically surround the screenwriting process, and in addressing these fallacies, which will be archived, and also Kevin has volunteered to teach a seminar for free on my TV. But in addressing and sort of putting a context around these fallacies, Kevin talked about the 5 story components, and if you could just, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through the 5 story components.
Sure. Your main character, because most narrative features are main character driven. Notice I'm saying most. And your main character's sort of flaw. Your secondary character, your second lead, sort of like a dynamic to the main character, the person who the main character spends most of the journey of the movie with. Or people. You can, of course, have more than one dynamic. The opponent, the person or persons who either stand in the way of the main character achieving his goal or her goal, or have something that the main character wants, or want something that the main character has, but for whatever reason provides opposition. And that doesn't mean the bad guy, by the way. It could be someone who's got very good intentions. They just happen to be in opposition to what the main character wants or needs. Then there's the adventure, which is what the principal characters do together in the second act of your movie. And then there's the genre. Those are the 5. So main character and their flaw, the secondary character and whatever the dynamic is between that character and the main character, the opponent and whatever the opponent wants, the opponent's motive, the adventure, the things they do together in the second act, and the genre. Those are the 5.
Very cool. So we're gonna jump back into the to the fallacies, and then after we're done with this, we're going to talk a little bit about the process, the business, the life. It's going to be a longer webcast this evening, so feel free to tune in and tune out, or stay with us the whole time. It will be archived on the site for you to check out later, and we're going to start indexing these videos so that you don't have to watch through the whole thing just to get to that little bit of information that you want to remind yourself of. So, okay, we were talking about the first draft and how people.
What I was about to say was that Ernest Hemingway pretty famously said that all first drafts are crap. And that's because the purpose of a first draft is not to have other people read it. A first draft is for mind vomit only.
Mind vomit.
That's right. Because just the nature of writing, and this is not specific to screenplays, this is specific to any kind of writing, is the nature of the process most of the time is that it is easier to deal with your ideas once they're out of your head and on the page. Once they're out of your head and on the page, they become much easier to develop, to manipulate, and so on. And in your first draft, you don't want to edit yourself. So you're not worried about manipulating them and shaping them so much at that point. You're just getting them out of your head. Now, they're going to have some shape, obviously. But it's not the primary goal of a first draft. The primary goal is just to learn more about your story, more about your characters, more about their relationships, and get the ideas out of your head and onto the page so you can begin to shape them.
Okay, that makes sense.